All right, Professor Rodesiler, we are on the second reflection from the MCTE conference. This seminar we attended was called The Dangers of Self-Censorship. The main insight, I guess, that I took away from this is that, which wasn't exactly the point that the speakers were making, but it's something that I certainly inferred throughout, especially by the end of their presentation, and it is that censorship can be as harmful, or censorship can be harmful or free and enabling. I guess in my framework, in my frame of mind, censorship can be a good thing in the sense that some students aren't ready to tackle certain topics, and so what you're doing is you're preventing them from diving down, I guess, that rabbit hole, if you will, prematurely. And so what you're doing is you're saying not now, maybe later. So it's the kind of discernment used when a parent doesn't allow maybe a 5 or 6-year-old to watch a rated R horror movie, just out of compassion and sensitivity for the child. But censorship can also create ignorance as you grow and mature, and then if you're not educated at the proper time. But then the question becomes, what is that proper time? A little bit specifically about the seminar itself. It began as a research project. I believe the presenter was actually an undergrad student like us, perhaps a master's student, but I believe an undergrad student. And she was looking at a lot of AP courses and other curriculum that focused on, the canon as we discuss it in literature. And also discussing, YA Lit and other, I guess, more culturally relevant literature for students, and how some of those books have been banned, or teachers are just afraid to approach those books. And so that's the self-censorship that she discusses. Some parents simply censor teachers in a way by desiring their particular child not to be exposed to what they consider bad ideas. A lot of these things include, according to the presenter, sexual content, alcohol or drug use in a book, foul language used, or violence. But students, when surveyed, did not believe that this particular content matter made books inappropriate, because their case was, we hear foul language every day in the hallway. Why not read a book about that? And so, or not about it, but including it. And I think that is a fair point, because as teachers, we want to make our content, our curriculum relevant to students. And education at its core is, an explorative process that looks directly at the world around us and tries to make sense of it. And so I think including things like, foul language in a book, I would not avoid that, because that is a part of the world that surrounds our students. Again, maybe not a first or second grader, and we would hope that our students maybe have greater senses of morality or something more idealistic that would prevent them from using foul language in the hallway by the time they got to high school. But sometimes things are reality, and I think education should exist within reality and not always within the ideals of what we wish our society could be. So returning to my discussion on censorship, specifically relating to the presentation, they talked a lot about standards and the canon, as I discussed, and talked about how not a lot of YA books or other oftentimes censored books, they're not the canon. Also, we discussed a bit about how war is not considered offensive material, even though some people are pacifists and are very offended by that. But obviously, something like sexual violence or abuse, is. So we discussed a lot about how certain people's cultural filters, certain people's lenses, and the places that they come from affect, how they believe, or what they believe to be content that is appropriate or inappropriate. So, the classic example of sex, alcohol, language, and violence as being what's inappropriate content is not true for everybody. And I think that is the point that led me to what I opened this presentation with, this brief presentation here, that censorship can be harmful or free and enabling, meaning that you do want to be compassionate to your students, but you don't want to censor them and hide them from ideas. But certain students have certain filters that cause them to believe certain types of content is negative or bad or evil, or just inappropriate, and then other students will believe something different based on where they come from. And so I would not advocate that, yes, we should, full force just forget about censorship and just teach all these controversial things, which is kind of where the presentation was going, although we actually it spun off into a discussion about LGBTQ rights and how that many conservative schools don't want books relating to homosexuality to be included in their curriculum. But it was interesting to me that the censorship discussed was oftentimes a left-wing or a topic connected to left-wing politics. We talked a lot about homosexuality or abortion or some of those other big issues for the left. And one thing I found interesting was that in a seminar about censorship, we didn't discuss the censoring of conservative voices. And there's a lot of work being done discussing academia and how it tends to lean left already. So by uncensoring even more topics related to leftist viewpoints, I guess, it's just interesting to me that no one brought up anything censored on the right wing. Certain pro-life voices are dismissed as hateful to women, or pro-Second Amendment opinions are seen to be simply pro-gun and somewhat murderous. Religious, conservative religious people are dismissed as homophobes and some other things. And so I don't understand why their viewpoints shouldn't be unlocked at the same rate, as far as made appropriate for classroom discourse, at the same rate as certain controversial left-wing opinions such as pro-abortion or pro-homosexual marriage. I'm not interjecting my own opinion into this. I think that both sides deserve a fair share, a fair shake, I guess is the term that a lot of people use. I think that education should be liberal arts, and I think that means that we either censor appropriately and kind of hone into the center and try to keep controversial topics out of the classroom at certain points from both sides of the aisle, or we sort of unlock the door to both sides of extremes and controversy and allow students to kind of wade through. And that, I don't think that's very responsible either. So I think really what it comes down to is a discernment process of what is appropriate for a student to handle at this point developmentally. What are they encountering in the outside world, and how does that affect the work we do in this classroom, and how can I maybe use that to frame their future in a positive light and frame the curriculum we're studying in a positive light so that they can grow and develop from whatever cultural background they come from. And I think that's at least my dream for my classroom, and that's kind of all the thoughts and the opinion that sort of formed out of the dangers of self-censorship seminar. Yeah, feel free to contact with any questions, but for now we'll be on to the final reflection. There may be two more.